Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. In the first part of his posthumously published Offenses Against Oneself, Jeremy Bentham is considering arguments that have to do whether male-male homosexual relations ought to be prohibited or punished, and he's already ruled out some when he turns to one particular set of arguments that have to do with population dynamics, right? He's got it headed as whether it hurts population. So the idea is that, the more people you've got, the better off you are, and you want to make sure that you can at least hold your population steady. The assumption back then was more is better, and we still see people talking about this today. We're in danger of population collapse in the developed countries. It's usually not going to be attributed so much to male-male homosexuality, but to all sorts of other things, to women not having their fair share of babies. But some of the same arguments could actually be used, as we're going to see. So he says, a notion more obvious, but perhaps not much better founded than the former, is that of male-male sexual relations being prejudicial to population. And he brings up Voltaire, who appears inclined in one part of his works to give some countenance to this opinion. He speaks of it as a vice, which would be destructive to the human race if it were general. Now, destructive to the human race, how so? People would just stop reproducing. And in general, sure, if there were no male-female sexual relations going on, if it were universal, okay, the human race would probably die out unless we did cloning or something like that. General is kind of an equivocal term there. What if half of the population were not engaging in heterosexual procreative sex and half of the population were? Would that be enough? And Voltaire actually brings up something kind of strange. He says, speaking of Sextus Empiricus, who would have us believe this practice was recommended in Persia by the laws. It's interesting because what we notice in the Greek texts earlier than that, like Plato's Symposium, for example, is that the Persians don't like that sort of thing. So we're not really sure if Sextus Empiricus is right about this. But he says the effect of such a law would be to annihilate the human race if it were literally observed. So, this can't be a good thing. And Bentham says, well, you're actually making a bad argument there. He says, for a law of this purport he represents to be observed, it's sufficient that this unprolific kind of venery be practiced. So venery, sexual relations, unprolific, not producing kids. It's not necessary it should be practiced to the exclusion of that which is prolific. There's plenty of people who will have male-male sexual relations, but also sleep with women, too, and make babies. I mean, that was a very common thing in ancient Greece and Rome and probably in Persia as well. So this idea doesn't really hold up. And he says that there should be ever wanting such a measure of the regular and ordinary inclination of desire for the proper object as is necessary for keeping up the numbers of mankind at their present footing. That's a notion that stands warranted by nothing I can find in history. Put men and women together, and not every single one of them, but some of them are going to have sex. And so, it's kind of stretching the imagination that we would have this universal destruction of the human race because nobody wants to have sex, procreative sex, right? So then he says, all right, let's consider this a priori, meaning let's reason about this. We're going to use some authorities here, David Hume, Adam Smith, two contemporary figures that are writing a lot about not just their philosophy and economics, but population and whether it's a good or bad thing. And both of them note something that is pretty important and really does apply to the people in our own day who are worried about population decline. What determines whether you have sexual reproduction? It's not the strength of the inclination, the sexual inclination, wanting to get it on. People can have desire, right? And there's lots of different ways to satisfy that desire. What determines whether the population is going to go up is the quantity of what he's calling the subsistence available that can be grown. So this means food, or we could call it economic factors. And so, you might think in our own time about the generational thing, why aren't the younger generations having enough kids to keep up the population in the United States or in Europe or something like that? Because kids are damn expensive. And if you want to make them, more, common, well, it's got to be cheaper. You got to provide some childcare. You got to figure out how medicine is going to be provided. You got to make food cost less, right? You got to offer job opportunities. If you don't do that, it doesn't do any good to complain about there not being enough babies being born, right? And so, back in this time, it was mostly thinking in terms of food, but we could also think in terms of medical care, we could think in terms of education, we could think of all sorts of things. And Bentham is saying that's what you actually need to focus on. Another a priori matter that we could consider, and this is getting kind of far afield, he says, well, what if the inclination of the male sex for the female sex were to lessen a lot, right? He says, population is not going to suffer until the inclination of the male sex for the female be considerably less than 100th part as strong as for their own. So if suddenly, you could put out a gay gas or something like that, and all the guys now just want to have sex with other guys, and they're not interested in women because you've managed to mind control them or something like that, that would have to be a really strong change to go on, right? Because most heterosexual guys want to have sex with women. They might also like having sex with guys. They might have all sorts of other things that they're into, but it's a pretty strong drive. So Bentham is saying, you can do whatever sci-fi stuff you want with this, but that's probably not going to be happening. So we can put aside the a priori sort of, rational argument stuff. What does experience teach us? Has there ever been a society in history that we can think of where the guys just started saying, I don't want to have sex with women anymore, only other guys, and the population collapsed as a result? We don't have any evidence of that going on, right? So what we actually do have is a counterexample. Who's that? The ancient Greeks. They loved getting it on, the guys, with other guys. As a matter of fact, they thought it was really cool. And they did that, but they didn't have a population decline because of it. As a matter of fact, they had so much population that they had to send colonists off to other places, and they, in effect, colonized the not just Mediterranean, but even the Black Sea, right? There were Greeks all over the place. So that one doesn't seem to hold, right? He says, the bent of popular prejudice has been to exaggerate this populousness, but after all deductions are made, it will still appear to have been quite remarkable. Even with all the wars they fought, they still had population growth. So there's nothing about male-male sexual relations that seems to lower the population in antiquity, so long as you've got enough food that's available. He also brings up something else that extends the argument in an interesting way. So let's say you want to, against experience and against reasoning, say that we should rule out male-male homosexual relationships because those guys aren't having enough sex with women and producing children as they need to in order to keep the population at least level or to increase it. Well, then you should be ruling out two other things. You should be equally punishing people who are celibate. Now, who is celibate? Some people are celibate just because, they just don't want to have sex with anybody. We could think about, people who are, as we describe them today, asexual, or we could think about people who talk about themselves as being involuntarily celibate, right? And that's a whole other can of worms. But there's others who take religious vows. So monks, nuns, priests in certain religious traditions, certainly Christian traditions, in many others as well, they, at least in theory, aren't having sex. They would be, keeping the population down by doing that just as much as guys who are having sex with each other and not procreating in that way are. So if you want to, as he says, burn homosexuals at the stake, you should burn monks too, right? But, we don't want to do that, so therefore we shouldn't do that. Prostitution, he also talks about, right? He says women who submit to promiscuous embraces are almost universally unprolific. Now, that's a fancy way of saying prostitutes typically are not having kids. Could be because they're actually practicing contraception, right, in a lot of cases. And so he says, in great towns, a multitude of women will always be this case. In Paris, the number of these women has been computed to at least 10,000, right? The women were no more than a certain quantity of prolific vigor to apply to them might all stand as in good a way of being prolific as other women. As a matter of fact, they would have a better chance, right? But if they don't have kids, and he says, if all this vigor if all the vigor that is over and above this quantity were to be diverted into another channel, so away from prostitutes towards, monogamous, procreative, male-female sex, guys aren't going to prostitutes, they're going to their wives or, girlfriends instead, making babies, well, then you would also have more population. And so if you're going to rule out homosexual relationships, well, then you got to rule out prostitution as well because they're slowing down the growth of the population. And he says, these are kind of ridiculous proposals, so it shows you that your proposal is kind of ridiculous as well. And he's going to say, the truth is the sovereign, if he will but conduct himself with tolerable attention with respect to the happiness of his subjects, need never be in any pain about the number of them. So no laws are actually needed to prevent population decline due to homosexuality. What you really need to do is attend to what Bentham calls the happiness of the subjects. So going back to this, if people actually have enough food and medical care and opportunities and the things that they need, they're going to make babies. If you want to fix population decline, you have to create incentives for people to have babies, and you can rely on human sexual desire to make that happen. So if you've got a society where that isn't happening, it's not due to, the gays or anything like that. It's not due to any sort of non-heterosexual practices or communities. It's because of economic matters, and history shows us that. Because you can have a culture like that of ancient Greece where many men are, in fact, fathering children, but also having homosexual relationships. And, it's not keeping the population down. It's actually resulting in population explosions. So this turns out not to be a very good argument for prohibiting or, punishing male-male homosexual relationships.